My mom was born on the North Dakota prairies and grew up there. Her dad was not a farmer, he was a Lutheran pastor. And so she grew up in a home that was very strongly faith-based, and that influenced her whole life through. So her sense of relationship with God and the importance of serving God was ingrained in her as a little girl. When she was in her early 20s, it was the 1940s, and she was out at a shipyard working there as World War II began, and she went to a little Lutheran church in Seattle, Denny Park Lutheran Church, and she walked into the church, and there was a young man preaching. He was a lay preacher, and she looked at him and she said to herself, "I'm going to marry him." And within a year, they were married. So my father was a lay preacher, and he became a Lutheran pastor. But they got married, and his dream, and her dream then, was to be a missionary. And they thought about India and Pakistan, and so they were married, and within the first year of their marriage, he left. And this was still during World War II. He took the Queen Mary across and went to be a missionary starting in Pakistan. It was his dream to go into Afghanistan, which he never made, but Mom stayed home. And so for the first year of their married life, they were apart. And there's still some wonderful love letters that survive. And then she took the Queen Mary across and joined him there in Pakistan. And so they served as missionaries for 10 years in Pakistan. They came home, and my father was ordained, and then they were in the parish. And then he was a Bible school teacher, and then they went back to the mission field in Nepal. Well, she really was part and parcel of his life. So I think of them both as pastors and missionaries and speakers and teachers. And so she lived her life giving herself away, and she was an incredibly generous woman. There was a sense of welcome and love that just kind of percolated from her. And not just for me, I felt that always as one of her sons, but almost everyone who came in contact with her. There was such a warmth and a caring that she was almost immediately a friend with all. So it's given me a kind of a ideal, and sometimes it feels like an impossible ideal to live up to. So I'm a pastor, but not really a missionary, although missions is part of my deep sense of vocation and wanting to somehow make God's love real all across the world. So I still do what I can to be part of that. Her sense of hospitality, her wanting to welcome people, her gracious, inviting love, that really challenges me. I'm a little bit of an introvert, and I tend just to stay to myself, but I feel that internal impulse to try to welcome people, to be open when I meet new people. I can still close my eyes and see her warm smile and hear her voice saying, "Hello, how are you?" And so it does kind of, it has left a mark on me for good, and is a wonderful challenge for me to try to live out kind of the legacy she's left and live my life like hers. She was living at Good Samaritan in Kissimmee, Florida at the time. My father had been dead about, I suppose, 12, 14 years at that time. And it first became noticeable to her sister, who lived there in the village with her. And they were both widows, and they were best friends. And I would get a call once in a while from her sister, Laura, just saying, "Billie is becoming more forgetful, and she's having a little trouble." But every time I would go down, she'd still be absolutely her same self, and she was managing, living on her own in a little trailer there. But one day I got a call from her, and she'd had a very minor car accident. And she was driving the car just in the village, so they go about 5 miles an hour. They're not speeding around. And she went over a curb, and she couldn't extricate herself. She couldn't get out of it. She had to call somebody, and that alarmed her. And she suddenly realized, I'm not managing as well as I thought. And so then she called me, and she said, I'm ready to move. Can I come to Sioux Falls? And so that was the first dramatic change. She had been so independent. In fact, that's one word I would use for her. She had traveled round the world, and often on her own, and had gone not simply as a missionary, but after she retired, she'd done a lot of traveling to South America and to Asia and to Europe, so she was very independent, but really began to notice a stronger sense of, I need some help, I need some support. I can't do this on my own. And so she moved here and moved into a Good Samaritan independent living. And I suppose for a couple of years, with my support, I would visit her every day because it was just, 6 blocks from where I work on the national campus of Good Sam. She was doing fine. She had lots of friends in that independent living. And she would be more forgetful, and so there were strategies that we would employ, which, are not unique to us. We would write notes and put them on her refrigerator, and I would call her, have you taken your medications? Have you remembered the doctor's appointment? And we would go grocery shopping together, and so we'd have lists. And so we had all kinds of strategies to help support her and still to maintain some independence. And then she fell and broke her hip, and that was a significant turning point. So, up until this time, she really was just herself. There was some forgetfulness, but the personality of being so loving and welcoming, and the huge smile every time she saw you, and the sense of connectedness and love, that never changed. She broke her hip, and I got a call from the village where she was living, and so she spent, a week in the hospital. There was nothing really to do about it. It just needed to be healed. And then she went back to the village into the nursing home, or the skilled nursing, and began rehab. And then there was a very dramatic kind of development that I had not expected. And this really, in the progression, was the time when there was kind of the only time I can say the wind was knocked out of me emotionally. Because I got a call from the village saying, well, she's doing okay in rehab, and she's coming along physically, but we've noticed that she is more and more forgetful. In fact, we say, you need to take 10 steps and you need to walk, and within moments she might forget that instruction, that direction on what she would do. And so what they recommended, and I had been assuming all up until this time that she would rehab and spend a little time in the nursing home, and then hopefully we could go back to independent or assisted living. What they recommended is that she move to the special care unit or the memory care unit. And so, that literally left me speechless because I had not expected that. And within a matter then of a month, she had gone from being very independent, breaking her hip, hospital, rehab, to going into the memory care or special care unit, people with dementia or Alzheimer's. And so I talked to her, and I thought, this is going to be hard. And yet, this is where almost most amazingly, there was absolutely no faltering on her part. She said, if that's what I need to do, that's what we'll do. And again, no change in perspective or personality. There was this deep sense of love and grace and welcome. And so she moved into the special care unit, and it was really much harder for me, at least as far as I could tell. I don't know beneath the surface of her faith and the strong sense of courage and hopefulness, if there was some moments of doubt and, wow, where have I come to? Because she had gone from a woman who was used to traveling around the world and who was completely independent and who was interested in all of the things happening, and she had an extensive letter writing circle of friends. She'd gone to that very broad world, to these two, very small little areas. There was the great room that she lived in with the other residents of the special care unit, and then she had her own little room and one hallway. And so her world had narrowed dramatically. And it was hard to visit her there, although, again, her personality never shifted, never changed. And that happens to so many. She began to, be less energetic. And she lived there a couple years, so there was a progression through that time. And when she first moved there, we'd be walking down the hallway and we'd pass one of the other residents who was talking to an empty chair, and she would look at me and she'd say, "We have some strange people here, don't we?" And we would laugh together. And she went from that to really not noticing the people around and becoming less engaged. She went from being interested in the news and in reading to kind of being disinterested. She went from having kind of a selective appetite, but an appetite. She liked sugar, she liked malts and candy and stuff like that, to not being all that interested. So you could see the impact of the disease, but she never changed in terms of the broad smile and the welcome and that deep sense of faith that somehow I'm not alone in this. God is here with me. So that was a difficult journey for me, but she made it really possible, and the way she handled it gave me a sense of hopefulness and strength to face it with her. So that's kind of the journey. I often think that I was so fortunate. I mean, I would spend time with her every day, but she never lived in our house. She never wanted to. The CNAs and nurses there at the special care unit were wonderful to her, so I could leave her each time I would visit with a sense of gratitude. There are people here who will care for her personal hygiene needs and who are making sure she gets what she needs to eat. But in terms of facing a whole different person that the disease has shifted and reshaped, who has turned from a loving, happy person to somebody who might be crabby and unhappy, as happens at times. I never faced that. Her sense of love and grace never shifted. She became more and more tired, and I had to cajole her to get up and walk with me, but she was always unfailingly sweet and affectionate. So I don't know what to say to people who are really caring for people for whom the disease is changing their loved one and making it somebody they don't really know. That for me would have been a very hard burden to bear. It was a gift for me to go every day. So sometimes people would say, "You are such a good son." And I would say, "I come here to be loved and cared for in a way that I am nowhere else. It's not something I'm doing out of the goodness of my heart. It's something I need in my own brokenness, that I need to receive my mother's love," and that's the gift she gave. So not much that I can say in terms of caregivers. It was a gift for me to be able to be with her. I've shared this before. It was and this happens in Good Sam at times, and I'm grateful whenever it happens. We were in her room the last day she was alive, and she'd gotten pneumonia, and I'd gotten a call from the main nurse there who was a good friend by that time, and I knew really loved Mom, just saying the time is getting close. So I went and just stayed with her, and we were in her room together, and the caregivers were just so kind, coming in, checking, can we get you anything? What do you need? And, never bothering, but always wanting to be helpful. And I was sitting there with Mom, and she was kind of restless, and her breathing was becoming a little more ragged, and she said something like, "Is my room ready yet? Is my room ready yet?" And we were in her room, and I said, "Well, we're in your room, Mom, and everything is, the way you like it, the sheets and the pillow, it's all ready, I think." And then a few moments later, her eyes didn't open, and I don't know where she was at. She said, "Can I go home now? Can I go home now?" And so I realized that, we weren't there alone, that there was another presence there. And when she died just a little bit later, there was a wonderful sense of peace. Like this was not simply a loss, it was, but there was a real homegoing. And then, and this still connects with me, then all of the people who cared for her came into the room, and we had this wonderful little prayer service that, again, often happens. I hope happens very often in Good Sams around the country. So we prayed familiar prayers together. And we said, "The Lord is our shepherd, shall not want." And we sang, "What a friend we have in Jesus." So there was at the end an amazing sense of not simply finality, it's over, but faith. It's just beginning for her, and she's where she wants to be. And that was a gift too. Sometimes I think that we as caregivers come to see life with our loved ones as a burden, and it can be. It can be a real challenge as the disease impacts them and as the memories begin to fade and as they forget who we are. And yet, these are people who have given their lives for us. And I realize that all families, there's some dysfunction, and there are good and bad, and there are hurts and heartaches as well as joys. But this time with those loved ones is a precious time. It's a time to be able to give back what we can, to let them know beyond the impact of the disease, beyond the fog of dementia and the loss of memories, that they are still loved and that they're part of a community, a family, a relationship in which they will never be forgotten. And that, I think, is something we are gifted to be able to do, we need to do for those people who have loved us. You know, there are lots of statistics about the nature of Alzheimer's and the growing number of people who are affected, as we tend to live longer than this disease that robs people of their memories, of their histories, becomes more and more prevalent. And so you could say statistically, there's a bigger and bigger group of folks who are being affected by this, and it's important that we try to address this and find ways to help with the research, and for me, even more importantly, to care for folks. Within Good Samaritan, you know, this is a very significant part of our population, that we try to make real our mission of sharing God's love and our motto of "In Christ's love, everyone is someone." And so just from a kind of a faith perspective, I'd say this is one part of the resident population that is really challenging to help them realize that in Christ's love, everyone is someone. It takes all of us. It's not something one or another of us can do, or just those of us who are directly affected by it. But it takes a whole community who live together in the light of God's love and who can kind of put figuratively, their arms around the people who are forgetting themselves to help make real that love of God and that reality that there's still someone. There's someone important. There's someone who God loves. So that's what I'd say, I think.